Good evening. I'd like to call this committee of the whole to order. And before we proceed, Sarah has a person she would like to introduce.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, very pleased to introduce to Council our new Finance Manager, Alvin Kuzik.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
So he comes to us from University of Alberta most recently, but he's also done some extensive work for the provincial government as well. So very happy to welcome him on board to the team.
All right, excellent. Welcome. Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Right. Adoption of agenda tonight. Could I get a motion to adopt the agenda for November 8th committee of the whole meeting?
So moved.
Councillor Schwannard, all in favor? Carried. The adoption of the previous minutes of October 11th, committee of the whole meeting, and I need a motion. Councillor Beyer, all in favor? Thank you, carried. And we have no delegations. Reports from staff, infrastructure and planning, the land inventory report presented by Kundi and Shadhu. So you can come on down.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Chair and Council members. Kundi and I will be presenting on the land inventory report. We will be giving you guys you all an overview of the report. To the best of our knowledge, this report covers all the town-owned lands. However, as noted, as a note, I should update you that the data in this report has been pulled from the town's web mapping system, and we are yet to confirm if this covers 100% of the town-owned lands, specifically the ones that are leased out. Okay. So we will briefly run through a number of terms and definitions that are used in this report, starting with zoning districts in Edson. As per Edson's current land use bylaw, a land zoned as airport district is intended to establish an area surrounding the airport in Edson and provide for appropriate airport-related uses in accordance with Edson Airport Vicinity Protection Plan. Residential is a land use district intended to provide for residential spaces for single-family residential and multi-family residential districts, units such as low, medium, and high density. Urban reserve is a designation generally intended to reserve areas in the periphery of a town or a municipality to allow for the future growth. Parks and recreation is a district generally intended to establish an area for the use and development of public spaces for leisure activities or recreation. Commercial is a zone intended to provide for commerce-related uses with classifications such as retail businesses, office spaces, service-related businesses at different scales, such as neighborhood or along the highway. Industrial zoning districts establishes an area of light and heavy industrial uses in areas of the town where minimal urban services are required or provided. Community services is generally intended to establish an area for the development of publicly or privately owned institutions or community-related services such as place of worship, schools, nursing homes, hospitals, or cemetery. Direct control zoning allows for development to occur in an area of special character or circumstances. Town also owns some parcels in Yellowhead County, which are zoned as per Yellowhead County's land use bylaw. And as per the land use bylaw of Yellowhead County, natural district zoning allows a variety of uses, such as recreational and institutional uses, which aim to provide amenities, accommodation, and entertainment to visitors and local residents. Rural district is a designation used to regulate development that is compatible with the continued operations of agricultural uses in the county area. The report also mentions municipal reserve, environmental reserve, and public utility lots as a designation to some of the town-owned parcels. Municipal reserve is a zoning for parcels that may only be used for public parks, public recreation areas, school board purposes, or as a buffer. environmental reserve lands designated under this district must be left in its natural state or be used as a public park. And public utility lots, which are also called as PUL, are generally used for municipal infrastructure or pedestrian access. And municipal infrastructure can be above ground or underground. I will now pass it on to Kundi to present the rest of the slides.
So, continuing on from where Shaivo left it, we did as well want to point out certain key features or identifiers that we think are worth mentioning from the report. So the first being vacant or undeveloped land, with the first parcel being zoned as a single family residential, followed by another, that's our community services, and then followed by an urban reserve just right outside the outskirts of a neighborhood district. And then lastly, outside the town of Edson, within the Yellowwood County. And so the reason for bringing all of this up is just to show an example of how, although some land is undeveloped, just because of how they're zoned, it does have certain implications. And so something to be wary of or mindful of when we think about development, because each zoning has different implications on what can actually develop and what to do with that land. So moving on, we also thought to make a note of parcels of land that are developed or have some form of structure established. So in this case, we'll specifically be looking at properties, and with the first, second, and third being zoned retail, commercial in all on 50th Street. And with the last is a residential and being zoned as a single family residential. And so with all these properties, it's just it's nice to point out that we already do have land that's serviceable and ready. And it's just a matter of also just seeing what we currently have that's serviceable and what can we use that's already developed. And then moving on to leased land. So leased land is for land that we have leased out to other parties. And so with the first, it's hard to see exactly what it is, but so for this leased land, we visited the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and it's itself is zoned as a heavy industrial, followed by a parcel of land zoned parks and recreation. And with this piece of land, it was leased for billboard, and followed by another one within the airport district, which comes as to no surprise, since I think the airport district zoning has the highest concentration of leased lands itself. And lastly, we found one at community for community services, and for this one, it's leased to the near community Catholic school. So last but not least of the key features and identifiable encroachments. And so with encroachments, we mostly observed parcels of land within the parks and recreation zoning districts. And as you can see from the picture above, it might be hard to identify, but for all of these, we categorize them as back alley encroachments. And of course, which you can see are being impeded in some of the areas that are highlighted. And the reason for bringing these up is that from a neighborhood design point of view, what does it mean for things like ability and access to homes? So these are some of the questions we're just asking ourselves as we go into this report and seeing some encroachments and just trying to understand. So what can we do moving forward when it comes to items like these? And just one thing to mention about these past 4 slides just shared. I just think that great examples, in showing the types of land uses that we've used for town-owned lands. And as well, it just makes you think of the fact that although we want to focus externally on what we can purchase or what we can invest in, it does also demonstrate that internally there are a few things that can definitely work on when it comes to land use. And moving on from there, we thought to include a report analysis. And this basically just aggregates all the information together. And from what we can see above, it's clear to see that parks and recreation and residential hold the largest repository of town-owned lands. And what's interesting is we try to do a split between what is used and what is vacant or undeveloped. And within the zoning district, so it's quite interesting because of all the total of 366 parcels of town-owned land, about 55% of that land has some structure or some use to it, whereas 45% is vacant and undeveloped. And next, we thought to report on the assessment value of each zoning district. And to no surprise, Parks and Recreation has the highest assessment value, and mostly due to the large number of parcels that are within Parks and Recreation, about 171. And overall, we calculated an assessment value of around 76 million for all town-owned parcels of land. And then next, we just wanted to hone in on the area of each zoning district in hectares and square feet. And this time, as we can see, the rural district comes out ahead with the largest portion of land mass in all of Edson. And last but not least, we thought it would just be a good comparator to then look at the number of lots within each zoning district as a percentage to the total of 366. And beside that is the area of each zoning district as a percentage of the total area, either in hectares or square feet. And so this does sort of illustrates how, in spite of the number of lots within each zoning district, there could actually be more, another story to it. As you can see, the rural district has, I think, one of the least number of town-owned parcels, but then overall it has the highest percentage of area in the town. So there's just something to be mindful of when it comes to a lot of these zoning districts. And then next, we just wanted to speak on a SWOT analysis from a planning and economic development perspective, which we think is a great way to sort of identify just how far-reaching land can be as a topic when it comes to a community perspective. And so we just started off just looking at a few of the strengths. And so the two strengths that we have, the first is we have a large repository of land. In land mass, Edson is about 2,943 hectares in size, with the town owning about 26% of that. We also have a high volume of traffic, and the Trans-Can Highway carries about, some of the heaviest traffic flow, Alberta. Now looking at the weaknesses, we do have service level capacities and constraint issues. We currently operate above our capacity levels. So and that begs the question of how much more growth can we actually accommodate. And when it comes to transportation and roadway networks, we have a large number of existing road pavements within the town that require repairs and upgrades. And this is important because when it comes to land, roads are the access ways to that land. And then moving on to some of the opportunities that we're seeing. First, being a transitory and tourism destination with over 10,000 vehicles passing through Edson daily. So there's extraordinary potential in capturing some of the traffic. Attraction and retention of newcomers beyond just the large supply of jobs in Edson. We as well have an accommodative infrastructure and have a great quality of life. So having a hospital, an airport, and educational institutions, that's something that's very favorable for people to stay. Then lastly, we just thought to look at some of the threats. The first being the population decline. And with Edson reporting more than a decade long of stating population decline since 2011. The next is youth migration, and these adverse effects on labor needs, the skill shortage here in Edson. Moving on from there, in our due diligence in preparing this report, we actually came to find that there are a number of policies passed in previous years that are quite related in some way, shape, or form, and also associated to land and property acquisition and disposal. So we have an investment policy, we have a sale of town-owned land policy, asset management policy, an encroachment policy, and a purchasing policy. And we just thought these would be good to bring up because we might at some point find value in revisiting some of these policies and seeing if there's some alignment among them all, especially when it pertains to what we're going to do in regards to land and property acquisition and disposal. And lastly, we just want to touch on a few next steps and things for us to concentrate on. So not in any particular order, but the things we wanted to mention is just doing a bit more research in acquisition and disposition strategies and seeing what we can bring forward. Also revisiting existing policies associated to land sales and acquisition. And then furthering on our research into the lease process of land. As Travel mentioned, there could actually be other parcels of land that were leased, so that this continue building that inventory. And also doing a bit of due diligence on existing lease, purchasing or acquisition agreements, and seeing what we have in place. And all of that leading us to hopefully in 2023, in the first quarter, bring forward to council acquisition and disposition strategies, and as well any policy amendments that we might that might ensue from the research that we've been doing on existing policies. And with that said, thank you. Listening.
Thank you very much, Kundi and Shadel. Any questions from council? No questions? Oh, Councilor Sherrard.
Through the chair to Kundi. Following this, most of our land we own in Yellowhead County is because we have water wells around it, just scaling through. Is that correct? Because one of the parcels is quite big. It's 141 acres, but I believe we purchased land because we have a water well there. Is that correct?
Just
Oh, sorry, it's 166 acres.
yeah, so let me just comment from the chair to Councillor Conrad. We did anticipate questions on the report itself, so we just open up the report itself so I can just go to it.
If I give you the roll number, will that help?
Sure. Maybe while Kundi's looking for that, so maybe to address part of that question from Councillor Sherrard, is that a lot of these parcels still require further investigation. This is sort of the base inventory of where they are, some of the key attributes that were collected in the report. But part of the next steps as well is consulting with other departments and trying to figure out some of the history of why these pieces of lands were purchased. Some of them, you're right, are water leases. Some of them are still mysteries as to why the town owns them and what the value is of that asset. And through the work that Kundi mentioned in terms of the next steps and research on different policies and strategies for acquisition of land, I think that's going to go into the point where we're going to investigate these further and say, based on this, the history found, the town bought this for a reason that no longer is relevant. And so maybe this is one that can go on the disposition list. So this is sort of the root-based starting point. There's still much more research and work needs to go into determining what to do with these pieces of land.
Thank you, Mr. Kidlitz. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Byer.
Thanks. Through the chair to Kundi or Mr. Kidlitz. On the direct control, first I was surprised that we have 367 lots. That was a bit overwhelming just to look at that. And a lot of the forested areas are also town-owned lots. So I did not know that. That was really interesting to see how much we are beautifying our own town. So my question is, on the direct control in Hillendale, why do we have, like, are those house lots? When I looked them up on Google, it didn't work properly. And I was just wondering why they wouldn't be zoned residential or something more appropriate, instead of direct control.
Yeah, so from the chair to Councillor Baya. So for direct control, though, that actually speaks to land uses that are for specific uses. And so for that land, honestly, it might not be a residential building itself, but it just could be a piece of land that is specifically zoned for us to specialize in some form or use. And so that's my understanding of direct control. Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think the direct control parcels are the one around the north side of 118th Avenue, where there's a semi-detached products, I think, is probably where the direct controls are. All the stuff to the south, it's a single family, but the direct controls must have been a decision at some point. Maybe in there,
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I believe in council position, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's to provide options in terms of what goes on that north side of that road. In terms of, I think the plan was to have some multifamily, but what that exactly looks like, I think council wanted to control that to ensure that it met the strategies of the council today. I don't know, Councillor Sitchney, if that's correct.
Yeah, through the chair, administration. You pretty much nailed it right on the head. I think the intent of the time was to allow for flexibility. And for multifamily, and if somebody wanted to put an apartment building, they could put an apartment building, that kind of thing.
Okay. Any other questions? CAO beverage.
Just wanted to confirm, I did look in these, and those are, that's absolutely what it is it's north of the 18th Avenue.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Oh, everything backs onto the pipeline figure.
All right, okay. I had a question, Kundi, what exactly is natural land?
What, do you mean our natural districts?
Yeah, there was a listing there saying natural land, and there was, I think, 3 and 3 or something. It was listed on the inventory chart.
Oh, on the document itself.
Yeah.
Let me just open that.
Sure.
On this line.
Okay, that would be a natural district, sorry. I believe, yeah, that natural district.
Yes,
Yeah.
so natural district is town-owned land within the Yellow County.
Mhm.
And for that sort of land, it's usually used to, I think it's usually used for like campgrounds and also, and we even have wells in them as well.
Okay,
So that's kind of use that we have for them, although there are some parcels that are vacant as well.
sure, okay. CAO beverage.
Just for clarification, within the report, natural district is identifies land under the management of the province of Alberta as part of the provincial green area, and to regulate development in accordance with applicable provincial and municipal land use plans and policies.
Okay,
I believe that would be Wilmore Park.
And that's all within Yellowhead County land use bylaw.
okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Any more questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much for your presentation, most interesting, and sounds like we have a little more work to do in the future. Councillor Byer.
Thanks, through the chair to administration. So just to clarify, so this was brought forward so we can see that we have a lot of effort to do. And well, thank you for everything you've done so far. That looks like a large task. So are we going to have those policies that were listed in there, those 5 policies, then brought back for further deliberation at another date? Is that where this continues?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
at some point?
through our due diligence, we will actually have to revisit those policies and see if there's any alignments, if there's any overlap with other policies, and what we're going to do strategy-wise when it comes to land acquisition and disposition.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Very good. Next, corporate services, draft fees and charges bylaw number 2283, presented by Ms. Bittner. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Sorry, just getting this up. You know, it takes me a while. Sorry about that. So tonight we are just presenting the draft fees and charges bylaw 2023. This actually repeals and replaces any existing fees, rates and charges bylaws that we have. At the moment, that's 2214. We also did some reformatting on the fee schedule to make it easier to use and standardize some language throughout the municipalities as well. So the changes that you'll see in the fees bylaw, we have some that were reflected in the draft budget that was presented on October 15th. And they include the slight increase for tax certificates, the water and sewer usage rates amendments for the year, the waste management and recycling rates, also an increase in the landfill fees to better reflect with regional amounts. And the business license fees have been revamped, and that was discussed at the September 13th committee of the whole meeting. Since then, there's also been a few additional changes brought forward that are also included. Removal of the shower rental fee at the leisure centre that became an enforcement issue with some problems there. Additions of the secondary niche park fee for the cemetery. We're moving towards a more cost recovery model within the cemetery. And billboard fee revisions and clarifications in the bylaw 2264. We had changed, we used to have a yearly renewal for the billboards. We've now made that a sort of a one-time fee of $500, and there's no renewal required. So we just had to reflect that within the fees bylaw as well. So with those, the ones looking at that really would most sort of impact on the residents as a whole are the utility rate increases. So I thought we'd just do a little overview of those again. You may have seen these or similar tables to this when we went through the budgets. So we have a split between our base budget and our base budget plus the optionals. So you can see over in this column here, your average annual increases for residential and non-residential. And again, down here, whether it's base or base plus optionals, we use a 20 cubic meter a month sort of average when we do these comparisons. And also just on the right-hand column there, we can see those percentage increases for both of those options that were presented at the budget. And just for refresher, the water rate increases for the base budget included the items that we see here. And then the optional was also the inclusion of the amounts at the bottom there. The very bottom one there is a proposed additional reserve transfer that we hadn't had before, just to start building up some of those our infrastructure reserves for future replacement of the water systems. And again, for the sewer, again, what made up the base budget increases, and then again, the optional that would be included with that. Included with the optional was the initiation of a backflow prevention program. And again, at the bottom there, you'll see another proposed additional reserve transfer increase. So they are all included in the tables that you see there. They're also in your agenda package too, those tables. So we did go out and look for some intermunicipal comparisons. There are, and we did find quite a number, but there are some sort of limitations. There's no real direct comparison. We did look at 12 different municipalities, and these are comparing our proposed 23 rates with their 22 rates.
They're the ones that we could gather from them. And it does look at it at this time just from a dollar to dollar value. There's a lot of things to dive into, which just with timing and resources didn't have the able to do that right at this time, because they can include different things. Different service levels are included, how they calculate their rates. I know, for example, some have recycling in the utilities, some don't. So yeah, it's a really a bit more of an in-depth needed for that to get you more exactly what's included in the different rates. And the other variable, of course, is when we sometimes look at them, we like to look at them together with the tax rates. So my intention is to bring that back a little bit further into the new year when we've got more information from everywhere. Then you can kind of look at those municipalities together. So if it is in utilities or is in taxes, you can at least see those differences combined. So having said that, from what we've looked at just from the nominal values here, for waste and recycling, for the residential there, the orange line is the average of our comparators. And then on the left, we have where Edson sits at this time, comparing our 22 to 23. So that was for garbage collection and recycling. We have one for our water rates comparison. Also one for sewer. And this is one of those areas where it could be some of those comparators and more in depth is needed, because ours also includes, of course, our wastewater treatment plant capital cost recovery. Other places might not have things like that on theirs. So that's just an example of how some of those can, might not be exactly as it looks at this stage. And then as a total, we looked at all the sort of utilities in the total. So you can see at this time with that comparator average, we're actually sitting right on that average with our 2023 rates. Yeah, so next steps for this particular bylaw moving forward. As you can see, we did talk about the business license fees on September 13th committee. We presented a lot of these also at the draft 2023 operating budget on October 15th. So for the November 15th regular council meeting, our intention is to bring the bylaw back for passing with any adjustments that may be made based on discussions tonight, along with the presentation of the 2023 budget as well, to get that more sort of finalised for bringing it forward to the December 6th meeting, which we would then bring along the budgets for approval for 2023. And then on January 1st, the new fees and charges bylaw, those rates will come into effect. So yes, any questions from that?
Thank you, Ms. Bittner. Questions from council? No one? Well,
Chair, Ms. Bittner. You mentioned billboards have a one-time fee now, or is it that because there's Appendix D shows that billboards are maximum 5-year approval at 100 a year, but now they can do all 5 at once. Is that the idea, or is this like $500 for eternity?
Through the chair to Councillor Sitchning, I may pass that over to GM Kiplitz if he may have some clarification on sure.
So through you, Mr. Chair. So my understanding is it's $500 went from that to $500 per sign, and it's a one-time fee. So even starting this year, as they came into the renewals, the new fee is applied and the new process is applied. But the new fee wasn't applied. That's the bylaw says. So it's a one-time now for everything.
Through the chair to Mr. Kitlitz. So then if they're, so how does a town, so say the town doesn't want the billboard there anymore, how does a town remove that billboard if they don't have to renew the lease at all? Or renew the permit, I should say, sorry.
So through Mr. Chair. So I don't know exactly where all these billboards are. If they're on our land, we obviously have ultimate control over who we lease and allow funds to be on our land. But if not, if they've been approved to be there, they're there, and they decide to do it. Right. So they're fine.
okay, anyone else? Councilor Pryor?
Thanks, through the chair to council and administration. So following the the meeting when Mr. Fisher presented the water systems within the town, and we're kind of sitting at that. It's taken a few weeks for that to sink in, and I'll admit it's pretty heavy. Definitely went back and re-listened to that, and just to refresh your memory so you can see where I'm headed here. There were 4 points that Mr. Fisher mentioned that were currently challenges that we needed to address. The first one was our current water capacity is insufficient. We were at 46 liters per second and we need to get to 85. So that's essentially doubling our liters per second. The second one was sections of piping in the water system are past the useful life. This is that 7th Ave, 10th Ave area that some of them were between 70 and 90 years old. So I don't know how long they were supposed to last, but that is worrisome. The third one was future regulatory changes. There's a fluoride thing coming in 2023, and it's expected to be needed to be addressed by 2027, as well as the pressure fluctuations in Pippin. So that's been really heavy on me. And I know we have in the asset management plan there's 0.04 per meter cube to address that over 20 years. What I'm challenged with is that that is not enough. And some of these things are knocking on the door. And he also said that we were going to have a few shortfalls. Water restrictions in the summer, which check, we've already had that for several years. Shutdowns at the spray park, we've also witnessed that as well. And challenges approving new developments. Something that I had forgotten about was that we did not do another development. We weren't able to approve it because of our water capacity issues, and that is really troubling me as well, because we are not in a position to accept new development in our community. And I think as the leader, we need to do a better job of addressing that. And I would propose that we would increase our water operational increase a bit further than what administration has proposed. I do realize and absolutely appreciate that you guys have already put that 72,000 in there. Like fantastic. Love to see that we kind of starting to think in that direction. I really don't think it's enough. I think we're really, it's a start, but it's not enough when we have 4 major things coming up, and I don't know what that costs, and I'm afraid to hear what the answer is, but $72,000 a year probably isn't going to meet it before that comes to us again. And I would propose that we have a discussion about perhaps if there's an entertainment to increase it beyond the 1.73 that's projected or presented to us in that based budget plus optionals, as well as I would be interested in directing administration if council is wanting to entertain this discussion as well, directing administration to seek through an outside source the full cost recovery utility rate model, so we can actually see how far our gap is. Our 2018 asset management plan model, I can bring that up, which I realize this is very ballpark numbers. We have a deficit then of 688,000 just in the water, and in the sewer 1.6 million, and maybe we've closed the gap slightly, but I think that we probably have not. So just thought I would see what council's thoughts are about how we address those 4 points that Pat mentioned about a month ago. And some of these things are knocking on the door, and they've already knocked on the door, and we've had to close those doors. So that's my would like to see if anyone would want to discuss that since it's on the table.
Anyone else? Councillor Schwanart.
Through the chair to Councillor Beyer, I agree what you're saying, but since 2018, we've been slowly moving towards cost recovery, which it sets up alarms, and we may not be moving at a fast enough pace, but we are moving in that direction. I agree we need to discuss it further. As far as development goes, if a person comes in and they have a serious development, at that time we can sit down and discuss with them that if you want to put the development, if we need to increase water or sewer capacity, instead of chasing them away, have the conversation. because we have turned down lack of, but we are moving in that direction. So I would not discourage the developer, but we need to have a conversation with them that if you want to develop, these are what we're up against. Because we have lots of things to fix, but we can't fix them overnight. But we have been moving in all directions to cost recovery. So we may want to discuss, do we move faster and more? Because I agree, 78,000 doesn't buy you anything. But we need to do it, so we could further discuss this. I would have to agree with that, but we have been moving in that direction. Maybe we got to pick up the pace. Just my comment.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Taylor.
To the chair, to Councilor Byer, certainly agree with the last thing you did say. In terms of we should be exploring what a complete cost recovery model would look like, so we can actually see the hard facts of what the gap is, right? I would certainly, agree with Councilor Byer on that point, that we direct administration to look into that, and then with that knowledge is power, and then to see what kind of rate. And I guess my question to you, did you come with a preconceived number in mind in terms of, we would go to 1.73 is what you'd, sorry, what am I looking for? Sorry, 17, where am I looking?
1.73.
1.73, sorry, I was not right. Did you have another number in mind, or?
Thanks. Through the chair to Councilor Taylor. Yeah, so I do have another number in mind. And a part of that is, so there's two parts to this. I was considering that we would bring that up from 1.73, which is proposed, to 2.0. And I realize that we do not have all of that information that the proposed utility rate model would bring to us, but I do know that we are likely, when we compare what other municipalities' gaps are, we have a lot of steps to take there. And I feel this is still a very baby step within those steps, as well as with that second portion that you mentioned with bringing this forward to seek a full utility rate model. So we would have to outsource that, and there would be a cost to having that done. And I would expect that 72,000 perhaps could be used towards that, maybe, because the money would still have to come from somewhere, so that we would still be contributing to our asset management plan while we're trying to see how far that gap is.
Yeah.
And if I may respond to Councillor Chenard's question, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. So Councillor Chenard, we did have a project that we were unable to bring forward, and that was located north of the current new hospital called the Parks. So if it's my understanding, maybe administration could correct me if I'm wrong, but it was directly related that we could not approve that because we did not have water capacity.
Okay. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for Councilor Byer for bringing this. I think is a hard, difficult conversation to have. But it's true that we are behind, and we have a long ways to go to get where we need to in order to address our aging infrastructure in our community. And as you highlighted, that report's from 2018. We all know what the inflationary pressures are in terms of construction projects. We are falling behind every time we delay doing things like this. However, I do know, going back on history, 10 years ago, we were not even covering our operational costs with utilities. So this has been a constant work in progress through several councils and administrations to first get to that operational piece, and now trying to close that infrastructure gap. I would caution, though, we're never going to be able to fully get cost recovery on infrastructure for our utilities, because that would be unaffordable for our residents. But we do need to close that gap. I have long stated the last number of years that I think it's odd that our sewer rates are higher than our water rates. I've never seen that in another community. And that I think that very least they should be on par with each other, and that extra revenue that is generated would go back into our asset management plan, into our infrastructure reserves. having a look at the increase that we have proposed already between the different programs. We're looking on average for a residential property of, close to $17 a month increase in the utility bills. And that on top of what looks to be around an 8% tax increase this year, at a time when, as we all know, things are difficult for many of our residents. So we all have to consider that as well. I would be in favor of a larger increase on our utilities slightly in order to help close that gap. What that number looks like, I don't know. I think going from $1.57 per cube to $2 that's quite the jump percentage wise. But I would certainly be willing to go with what I've stated previously to bring our water rates to the identical rate as our sewer system and take that extra revenue and put it into our capital budgets moving forward.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Schmidt.
Just to come back through the chair to Councillor Byer. Totally agree. We did turn one down, but at no time do we know how much water we need. So my comment is when we're approaching this, we need to meet with the developer and let them know, because I do appreciate we turn project down, lack of water, but also sewer. So then it depends what they're building. Are they going multifamily or whatever the size of the project? So it's sort of, we can't be against it, but we need to sit down, because then today, like even where we have development on the west end, if that did develop, at no time are we prepared to put in a $20 million sewer line. So it's just that we need to approach, we're trying to get more development, but at what cost? Would be more of a fair comment is what I was trying to into. Thank you.
Mayor Tahar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Mr. Councillor Schmidt's point, I think we shouldn't be hung up on the development issue. It's clear from the report that was given by Mr. Fisher, we're not meeting our capacity that we need to for our current residents in terms of water. And we've seen the water restrictions, and we know that our water lines need repair, and we can't do that without additional dollars. And unfortunately, our governments have been slashing our infrastructure money and burdening us with more operational costs. So we have to look after this and do so in I think a timely manner, as well as a manner that is going to be affordable to our residents. And I think Mr. Kitlitz had his hand up as well, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Kitlitz.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to supplement a little bit with the comments from Councillor Schmidt in terms of development. I think the way that we approach that right now is obviously a big residential neighborhood is a no-fly zone based on what happened with it. It's a park. But I think on a smaller scale, as Councillor Schmidt mentions, it's about communicating. I think what we do now is we'll run a model. So depending on the proposed development, where it's located in town, what the numbers are for that particular development, we send it off to our engineers to run the model to determine whether or not we can handle that particular use in that particular area of town. But certainly, as was reported, we're in a position where we can't even meet the current needs. So it's a challenge for sure. But certainly, we certainly entertain. We don't turn away. We have the conversations. So this one to be clear on that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Taylor.
Through the chair to council, this is the hard part. This would be a slam dunk if we weren't, and this goes to Mayor Zahara's point, if we weren't looking at about an 8% tax increase plus an increase in utility rates already. This is what's a challenge to me now, is where do we stop that dollar? And that's my challenge. How do we make it, as Mayor Zahara said, how do we make this still affordable for everybody in the worst inflationary time we've seen? At the same time, monitoring our own infrastructure. And this is my struggle that I'm having. I don't know what that magic number is, if we could increase it more, if it solves our problem, or how far along we are behind this, like I said, the gap as it is. And I guess I go back to what I said earlier in terms of finding that out. And once we find that out, maybe then we can create that plan of how to close that gap. Yes, we can't make a complete cost recovery, but we can close it. But I'm not sure right now. Right now, we can look at a tremendous increase. I just, that's where I'm at. That's my point.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Breyer?
Thanks, so through the chair to council, I just want to reiterate on what Mayor Zahar mentioned, if I'm trying not to put words in your mouth, but if I understand correctly, you were saying that you would agree if it was proposed that the sewer and the water were the same. I would be comfortable with that if the water was brought up to the sewer as well. That's something that I would certainly appreciate if council was able to step in that direction. And so I'm here with two asks to talk to council and deliberate this. One is bringing that water rate up to the sewer rate, and then the other is proposing that we would have to make a motion at our next meeting to direct administration to seek out what that model for the full cost recovery on our utilities is, so we can then make those decisions at that time when we have that information. But there are communities around us who have looked at that, and they're about, some of them are, in the same ballparks as us, and it's pretty scary numbers that they're seeing. So that's why making a step now, I think, would be helpful.
Thanks, Councilor Breyer. Councilor Position.
Yeah, through the chair to whoever can answer this. Are we talking about increasing the base budget utility rates or the base budget plus optionals utility rates?
That's options.
So increasing the plus options.
There's your.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I think this goes back to, I think some of my frustrations to Councilor Taylor's point is we go and want to report. Then we get the report back, we debate it. And then we're 2 years behind from where we are today, which is my frustration with our leisure center rates. I've been here for 5 years and there hasn't been an increase. I keep hearing, and this is no fault of anybody around this table. Yeah, we're gonna review that. We're gonna bring that back. We're 5 years behind where we should be. And the costs keep going up, the rates are not keeping up. And so that ends up back on taxpayers, and that's why we have an 8% tax increase. So it's an evil cycle that we face. So that's why, and I'm really hesitant to do a further increase in what's proposed here, because we have a sizable increase. It's 18% for the base budget plus optionals already. But there's some, I think, value add there for our residents for things like the backflow prevention program and enhanced levels of service. So I would be in favor of bringing that rate from 1.73 to 1.94 to help fund that infrastructure gap. And I think we do need to do that, get that information that you're talking about, Councillor Taylor, but to wait to do that before we do any increases, I think it puts us too far behind. At least this is a step forward. But I'm struggling with all this. I'm struggling with an 8% tax increase. But all those things on the list are things that need to get done. These are things that we keep putting off and we keep putting off and we keep putting off. And the chickens are coming home to roost now. And at a certain point, whether it's an extra $10 or $12 a month, it does have impacts on individual residents, but it has a much greater impact on what we're able to do as a municipality in terms of addressing the gaps that we have. I'd be happy to hear other members of council who haven't provided their points of view on this, to hear what they think. These are the difficult discussions that we have to have moving forward.
To the chair, and the Mayor Zahara's point, when you talked about the fees and rates, and I had written here, I'm in favor of the proposed fees and rates, and obviously we're still having a discussion on the utility rates. What kind of triggered all of this, and we go back to the 2021 budget discussion, we talked about revenue. And then we sort of said, okay, let's crack this thing open and have a look. And it still shocked me that some of these fees and rates hadn't been increased in quite some time, some of them upwards to 20 years. And that's a huge problem. So going forward, how do we avoid this? How do we put a trigger mechanism in place to say, we need to look at this every term? Or even put a mechanism in place that, like, Mayor's Hair brings up the Leisure Center, to say, will be a gradual increase each year, 50 cents or something like that, that we can build into this. And I know maybe we're rehashing an old discussion, but it's frustrating that suddenly we have to do a whole analysis every 10 years to say, where we are municipalities. Oh, we're way below. Let's now do this giant increase to catch up. I think it's frustrating and especially when we're doing this on top of already a sizable increase in taxes. It's a tough thing. So how do we build that mechanism in place so that whether it is every term that we look at this, and that's anyways, I'm frustrated by that point. Yeah, that's what
Thank you. CAO Beverage.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Taylor, for bringing that messaging for us. Essentially, it isn't best practice to leave your fees and charges to be for 20 years. We can't go back, unfortunately. So we're at this point where in order to really take a dive, and we mentioned this, I remember having that conversation during our 2021 budget. We wanted to do a further analysis on our fees and charges. We weren't able to do as full of analysis as what we'd like to do. To be fair, we weren't able to do that. So when we pieced it out as far as the business licenses and some of the planning and development fees, one of the things that I will note, we bring up the Leisure Center, and that's obviously, that's an area that we have. There's a lot of user groups involved. There's a lot of consultation that we're going to have to do in order to do that successfully, to make sure that everyone comes along with this. And it might need to be a multi-year adjustment. So we understand, and we do speak of this. We have these discussions when it comes to our approach to further revenue for those types of fees and charges. But again, we're always trying to balance that. We have one, we've got the taxes, we also have the utilities, we have the user fees. We're always balancing that. So, it's we are committed to providing a better strategy towards this fees and charges. For one, because we only have, as you know, we only have grants from the government. We only have our taxes and we only have user fees. Those are our three options. And it's becoming more and more challenging to operate our community with less. So it is one thing that I would think you'll see as far as our abilities to bring back for 2023. Looking at the budget, you'll note that there is a review for our user fees at the Leisure Center. And that was really important to us to make sure that we had addressed that and that we do it correctly. This has been ventured before, from my understanding, and it was not successful. So that's just something that we approached it a little bit. We're approaching it a little bit differently. I also, if I may, just wanted to speak a little bit on this utility rate model. We don't have a current utility rate model that we can provide information into that provides us out easy information. Essentially, we are the operational recovery that we do have. It's great. Some other municipalities would love to be in our position. Knowing that moving towards a capital cost recovery, which is what I understand that Councillor Byer is speaking about, it's a long game. It's a marathon. But when it comes down to being able to provide that information, it is most definitely an external process that we would have to, with a consultant, that the tool that's used is actually quite it's extremely functional in a sense where you're able to put in X amount of dollars and what that does and how soon that you can. But I do know communities that have been already down this path and for many years and are still not where they want. It is not something that you're chasing the dream of being able to pay off your infrastructure, unfortunately. So it's just a few notes, but absolutely, that option as far as bringing that forward is definitely something that is there. So I hope that answers.
Yeah. Counselor position.
Yeah, through the chair to the council. I think we need to remember, I'm in support. We should identify that really clear. Maybe follow the mayor's lead on bringing it up to at least equal with the storm. But I would like to see it not get eaten up in operationals and be put towards a capital reserve. And we need to remember as a council is everybody pays a water bill, including the hospitals and the province buildings. And you can control this because it's a amount tied to a rate. So if you don't want to water it on, you can save some money over the long haul. So there is cost savings effects people can do to mitigate the cost of it. So we've gotten to the point where we're near cost recovery. We need to get the optionals in there. We don't really have a choice in infrastructure. So I don't want to go crazy on it, but I definitely would be follow the lead on the bring it up to equal with the sewer.
May I just confirm so that because the numbers weren't updated within our budget information, so $1.94 is what you're considering as far as any.
I believe that's your estimate.
Yes, so through to administration. I believe based on our previous discussions, council was in favor of all the optionals for the utilities. So this would bring it from 173 that is proposed to 194 to make it identical to what is being proposed for the sewer system. And I would agree with Councilor Pasicny, all that additional revenue needs to go to infrastructure, to the asset management plan.
Councilor Smart.
Not sure who can answer this question, but how much is an average water and sewer bill? I live in town, but I have my own water.
It's about $100 a month, 100 to 110.
Okay, so an average house would pay about 110.
Plus water in the lawn and it goes up.
So what would this increase amount to? An extra $10?
It's in your package.
What's that?
It's right in your package, about $80 to $100 a year.
Right, I read that part, but I'm wondering what they actually paid.
Divided by all.
$8 a month.
Okay, I'm just curious on that because it's a matter of how much a month it's gonna cost the average person with the increase. Who's doing the math on that? 0.7 is an extra $10 a month or $8?
Sure.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to figure out if we're saying we're going from 0.17 to 0.19, how much is that extra?
Give me one sec, Councilor Shenard. I will tell you.
So I'm just curious.
It's not, honestly, it's not a lot.
Because where I'm referring to it as like where Councilor Taylor's saying with all the increases, some people would say, well, what's an extra $10? But times 12 becomes 100.
$15.49 a month currently is what I'm reading it, and then adding your increase would be.
Yeah, so basically, on average on 20 cubes, that'd be an additional $4 a month.
So it's not a huge increase. Okay.
$20 a month, the total.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a button on here. For overview.
I'm supporting the forestry industry, which pays.
So, and I think too, like, if you look at the comparisons. On your last page there of this, that would bring our utility rates still below average. Yet, you know, $4 a month, it's gonna be, that's for some individuals in our community, that's a lot of money. But $4 for all of our utility accounts is a huge amount of revenue for the town. And as Councilor Pasicny pointed out, we have users that don't pay taxes that pay utilities. And those are the ones that need to be contributing more to our infrastructure needs in our community.
Thank you. Councilor Taylor.
Yeah, I'll speak in favor then of the increase as well. And just through to Sato Beverage's point in terms of looking at the leisure center rates and things like that, which I'm happy to see. I'm still kind of tentatively worried where we're going because in a few years' time, if all goes well, we're opening a multiplex. And some of the fees and rates that we have currently, we're still going to see an increase, will be a jump, right? And I don't know how we sort of set people up to say, this is the current rate, and now when we get something much bigger and much nicer, essentially the rate will be potentially more. And I agree we can't go back in time. It's just it's a frustrating thing that at some point in a few years' time, we're still going to see that. Show, I guess.
CO beverage.
Through to Councillor Taylor, that's absolutely why this is so important to do this now. Is really understanding what the gap is and how we're going to be able to close that gap in advance of opening the facility.
Anyone else? Councillor Better.
Through the chair to the mayor and that, previous council on that, we did talk about the rates at the leisure center and that, and we went on a tours. A lot of the places said that we should be adding in a little bit more per year, per month, for everything, just to bring it up so that if we ever want to build anything, we have a little bit of a pad there to kind of offset ourselves. And I remember if I'm right, I think we did talk about it, but we never did follow through on it. I thought, okay, if we can do that for the next 4 or 5 years, at least we would have something there, to help offset wherever we want to put it in that. And I think we also talked about the water sewer rates back then too, and that, and again, it's kind of fell through the cracks on us. But I do agree that we should bring it up to the 1.94, and that to have no problem with that either. So, but it's a tough count. I know we're going to go 8%, but talked to a lot of people on that, and they realized that over the last couple of years, we've given a lot of breaks because of COVID and everything else, and they were expecting that we're going to be with everybody else around the country going to have a high tax increase. So we want to stay there. We're going to do it.
Councillor Taylor.
To the chair to council, I again supportive of the 194. So essentially, be on your utility be total bill $20 a month extra on average, I guess. And one of the things we have to think about, and one of the things we have to tell residents is a lot of things, not only inflationary things that affect the municipality, but a lot of provincial download. The mayor's there alluded to that, and that has been extraordinarily frustrating. So we're out there, we're talking to residents, and some residents will see this, they will see this change immediately. And there might be a frustration. Well, we're frustrated too. We're frustrated at all these additional costs that we've had to incur as well. And it's just that's a frustrating thing.
It's better.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Bevan, just on talking about the future costs for the multiplex operationally. We do actually have a bit of a reserve put aside that we can use to maybe help bring those up, subsidise them along. That came from when we were not going to be using the current site, and we put some of the money we were using there aside. So there is about 500,000 in the reserve for that purpose for the new multiplex.
I had forgot about that, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, just to wrap up the conversation, I think an important point was brought up that the last 2 to 3 years, we have been subsidizing taxation and really trying to help our residents. We know that could not continue, which is one of the reasons why we're seeing this big jump this year. And I hope our residents and our businesses understand that we did a 5% reduction in taxes, and we've never recovered from that. But maintained service levels. It was always part of the plan to gradually get back to where we need to, and we've done that. And this will be our final year for COVID. And then we've been faced with everything that we've seen. There are municipalities looking at over a 10% tax increase this year. We're at 8. Others are less, but some of them didn't do those tax breaks that we did. So this is a difficult year for us, and we're a community that I think sometimes have held back on doing some of the things we would have liked to do in order to pass on savings to our residents. But there's a demand for certain service levels in our community, and we need to be able to achieve that, and it takes money to do that. So I'm glad that we are going to have a little bit more money to put towards our water system, because it is concerning. That presentation that Mr. Fisher gave us here a few weeks ago, and I'm hopeful that we can get some of those water lines in that area, 7th, 8th, and 9th, fixed and repaired, and start building our water capacity.
Thank you. And Councillor Byron.
Thanks. So through the chair, to council, just to further, mention what Mayor Terra was just, commenting about our tax increases. Over the past 6 years, we've had an average of less than 1% tax increase per year. When we add in that, the 5% last year, but the -5 and COVID, like it's been a struggle for sure. So, the increases that we're seeing this year are perhaps, as a result of just being a little bit too passive on some things, right? And waiting and there's never a good time. But the clock's ticking on some of these things really quickly. So, I appreciate the deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I agree. 1.94 is probably the way to go. Yeah, downloading by the government is a common thing. We learned that at the AM meeting, talking to a lot of councillors, mayors. Yeah, it's so the suffering is kind of spread out provincially. And yeah, that's just and hopefully if Premier Smith wins tonight, she might even feel more benevolent for future funds, but we shall see. We will see.
You want to put money on that, Deputy Mayor?
No. Okay, I guess we're all done for this. Thank you, Ms. Bittner, for that presentation. And, so we have community protection services, none there, information items, sundry.
No, sorry, Deputy Mayor, point of order. Miss number 2 under corporate services, the capital budget.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, that's pretty major. That's pretty major, yeah.
What are you trying to save us money? Thanks.
Okay. Well, then, let's continue, Mr. Very important.
Right.
Thank you.
We save ourselves $31 million.
So, council, tonight we are presenting to the proposed 2023 capital budget. This actually consists of 46 projects this year. We have a couple that are deferred that are for future highway projects with the province, so we always include those just in case they happen to pop up in the year. 11 carryover projects from 2022. At this time, we anticipate that they may change come year end. 2 projects that may flow through the operating budget. That's to determine how they go forward, and 31 new projects for 2023. So you have this in your agendas as well. So this is exactly what you've seen there. We have our GM and our acting GM, Alfred here for protective services, and obviously Mr. Cutlets for INP to answer any more in-depth questions on these projects. So first with protective services, backup generator, another photocopier for the office there, structural protection unit, a sprinkler trailer, and then some accessories for our CPO1. We're going to have a second CPO1 on the road, so we need to have some of those accessories for them. So I'll pause after each area in case there's any questions that you have on those specific items.
Councillor position.
Through the chair, actually, not to protective service director, but to CEO of Everest. On copiers, do we not lease our copiers? And pay per copy?
Through the council position, that's an excellent question. We had a pretty robust discussion on that. At this, I think acting GM Sharam might be able to provide some information as to why the choice was for purchasing over lease on this particular thing.
Yep. The chair, when we looked at the cost value of purchasing versus lease, it was really close. The existing copier that we have over at Technical Services, we've got about 12 years service out of it. So when we kind of evaluate the usage we have over there and the next return we can get out of it, kind of made sense to look at the purchase versus the lease. Because again, it doesn't get the same usage as a town office does. It's used quite a bit, but not the same usage, so we get good life expectancy out of it.
So through the chair, back further to, so this is the town's lease then, they go on here?
Through to council president, yes.
Okay.
Can we pay by the page?
One would know
Yes.
there is electronic
Yes.
agendas available if you want to save.
But I'm
paper.
supporting the forestry industry.
It's 1 cent for black and white and 10 cents for color.
Your 400 people you see, you wanted to get a donation for me?
There's our.
Thank you, and yeah, if you want to help her budget,
I'm supporting.
Stop getting paper
Supporting
agendas.
the forestry industry.
can we print out his copies over at the fire hall? And get this in? So yeah, just on the protective services, certainly in favor of the CPO upgrades, obviously photocopier. I do know that the emergency backup generator and structural protection unit were discussed at our something that I brought up at the emergency management advisory committee meeting. So does protective services think this is required, or has this been added just because it was something that we discussed?
Both.
Okay.
The emergency backup generator system for the fire, again, our fire hall is kind of our backup EOC as well, or ECC. Emergency backup power is, I think, is critical for that facility. Again, power goes out, we need to open the doors, we need to get the equipment out, we need to be able to operate. The structural protection unit, again, we understand, even from our emergency management advisory committee meeting, that are really our number one risk is wildfire, even though we do have some partners in the region that have these trailers. The reality is that there's a major incident of those trailers were probably not going to be accessible to the town of Edson. They're going to be deployed to protect, other infrastructures out there. So we've identified both of these for quite some time. It's just, again, coming from that emergency management advisory committee, we felt it was appropriate to put them into this budget.
There's our.
Through to our CFO, where's the money coming from? It just says reserves, so which reserves? I'm sure it's in here because
Yes, for that one, that has been cited with the revenue sharing reserve.
yeah, thank you.
I think further question.
Council position.
I'm just looking at reserves. So my question is to the chair to Mr. Schramm. Because the oldest engine is a 2006.
Yes.
So that means it'll be 20 years old in 3 years.
2026.
4 years. So are we saving a reserve to replace that engine? Are we building any kind of contingency for that? Because it's, I don't know. Or are we gonna go the full 25 years on that engine?
We were working with our fire chief quite in depth about looking at the reserve, looking at our long range capital plan, our 3, 5, and 20, and we'll start building that reserve to make sure we have sufficient funds.
And for to the chair of the Director of Corrective Services, then or to Mr. Schramm. So then also too on that plan, is that an aerial or is that just a regular engine?
I'll defer to our fire chief on that one.
Why would you do that?
Because you got the biggest title.
Sorry, through to councillor positioning. For the last 8 to 10 years, it's been identified that the town of Edson should have an aerial apparatus. It hasn't been, we've been close in the past. However, with the county having an aerial there now, I don't know if the flavor is there for an aerial. I believe we need one for sure. However, that's going to be something that we have to look at in the future. Right now, we certainly don't have capital reserve to purchase an aerial in 2024 or 26. But there's options that we are exploring as well.
Councillor Schwanart.
Through chair to acting Bob, get over your title. Al, this structure protection trailer, that's like one of them trailers. So if you're on, say where we had nasty fires at the dealerships, this trailer could be provided on site to, let's say, warm up firefighters and
No.
No, it's not at all. What does this trailer do?
To the chair, Council Shenard, structure protection sprinkler trailer is to protect residents, basically you set up a big sprinkler line.
Okay,
So if wildfire is coming in, soak down the houses, create the protection line to stop fire.
okay, so I was like what they were talking about using Jasper, but this would be a much smaller version. When I seen $250,000, I thought, if that's what it is, it's not very big.
It's a sprinkler system.
No, but that's what I said, but when we brought that through is when we talked about the wildfires in Jasper, the ones they set up cost millions. Like the great big ones they had, so this would be one that would be adequate. to
This is a
protect.
standard size sprinkler trailer that most municipalities do.
Okay. That's what it is, perfect, it does make sense after other presentations.
Councillor Byer.
Thanks, through the chair to administration, two questions if I may. The first one is, I don't know if I missed it, but I can't seem to find it, is the capital reserve for 2023. I don't know if that's coming forward, but I realized that I see it in the last year's, but can't find this year's anywhere. As well as, I'm just trying to like correspond these items to our 5-year plan. And is there any way that we can get that at some point so we can kind of see what's coming down the pipe a little bit as well?
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer, I also just noticed that the capital was missing, so I apologise for that. I did have it all ready for you, and it wasn't included in the agenda. I do have the capital plan, sort of a draft that we've been working on. I think I have to stop sharing to bring that up. Let's skip there a minute. Okay. Daniel, can you help me please? Sorry. I can't see the Excel sheet. Okay. Thank you very much. That's not the one. Somehow I can't find it. Thank you. So this is our sort of draft we use looking at what's coming down through the pipeline. So for protective services, we're looking at within fire, we have these items here coming through in future years, and in enforcement as well. So that's sort of the ones we're looking at the moment. So there's an ATV, a replacement for the fire chief vehicle, and a 604 engine replacement. Thank you. I can do two at once here. So if there's any further questions on the technical services, if there aren't any, I'll move on. So under parks and parks equipment, we have a sort of parks and trails budget of 350. The park outdoor lighting of 180, downtown trees for 25, and then some equipment replacements for a mower, a trackless, and the cemetery mower. The items in blue are the projected carryover projects from 2022. So I'll pause after parks.
Councillor Clark.
Thanks, through the chair to Ms. Bittner, what types of things are getting proposed with the Parks and Trails for that 350?
With this one, I believe included in this is the bridge at Lions Campground there. We had to do that replacement for that bridge. I may need to defer if there's any other projects specified for that, but I believe that was the major project for this item for next year.
Yeah, just to reaffirm it, we're looking at the bridge replacement and also some trail upgrades. And it's kind of, we kind of lumped it all into the 1 year. And Tanya can add, I think that's the bulk of it, so, yeah.
Councillor Taylor.
This is chair, when you say trail upgrades, like anywhere specific you're looking at, or just repurposing or existing trails, what?
Through the chair, we certainly do have some areas of trail that are degrading, basically, needing resurfacing. There's an area in Hillendale that I believe like drainage is really poor, and they're looking at building back up. Again, they're just the existing infrastructure needs work.
Councillor Barr.
Thanks, through the chair to administration for those trail upgrades. Does that include tarring and maintaining all of the trails that we currently have where all the cracks are happening? A sealing, I guess is what you call it. Councillor Physician kind of alluded to this a few meetings ago, that it's needs to be done annually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mayor Sahara.
Thank you. I see, one of the items I asked for Griffiths Park outdoor lighting is included, but I guess I'm challenged with the number. What kind of lighting are we doing there? Are we putting airport lights in there or? Or is there more to this than what I'm seeing? Because, you know, I was thinking in the $20,000 range, not 180,000. So CO beverage.
Mayor Zahar, I can speak to this. It is actually a lot more complicated than one would think. I understand that it has to do with the electrical isn't actually there. Do you want to provide anything more? It's a little more complicated for sure.
Yeah, I have to defer to 10.
Quick.
I was in some of the capital budget planning meetings, so I got some commentary. So yeah, I'm sorry, CO beverage was correct. The service needs to be upgraded. So that's a big part of it. And then I think when we initially first looked at it, we didn't account for some of the other electrician specific type work that would have to be done. So this was our estimate based from our friend Mr. Fisher before he left. He gave us this number. Another thing that I just want to share with council, in reviewing the capital plan and working through this again just last week, we were with friends from WSP, and one of the sanitary projects we have in the infrastructure side goes right underneath that parking lot. So not that both these projects couldn't be done in the same year, just would take some extra coordination to make sure we weren't doing it at the same time for obvious reasons. So that's just another factor that we didn't catch initially, but there is some potential conflicts in the timing of those two projects for the coming year.
Mr. Chair, if I could have a follow-up, please.
Yes.
Through the administration, I guess I'm a little confused why we would put full electrical system in there. Why wouldn't we just do solar lighting at that location? Like at the current dog park. First of all, aligns with our plan in terms of reducing electrical costs, the environmental impact.
And it's far more cost effective to do solar type light standards at that location. It's not critical that they're operating all the time. So it would be, I say, on a street. Any upgrade there would be better than what's there currently, so. I don't know if that's been discussed or if there's some reasons behind that.
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, I think, and I'm trying to recall specifically what was discussed about that. I think that was contemplated, but I guess there were some concerns about the timing of how they would work, maybe. But certainly if that's the, you know, the direction of council to pursue that option further and get some quotes for a solar option, we could certainly do that. I can't recall specifically why we discounted that one at this point in time.
Council position.
Yeah, you're the chair to the rest of everybody else, but I think sometimes you go to the electrical because you can control when the lights shut off, so people stop banging pucks around. Whereas the solars run 24/7 as long as it's dark out. So I think that may be the reason.
I just wanted to note that this is our first look at this. We'd be happy to bring this concrete information back for council, so you have some information on this item.
Councilor Barr.
Thanks. Through the chair to administration, just to offer, I'm looking for a little bit of clarity. So that Griffiths Park outdoor lighting, is that for the rink and the basketball kind of hoop area, or I'm not sure if I knew where this was all intended.
And the dog park as well.
And the dog park as well. Okay, the whole park. Yeah.
Okay.
Next we have up is facilities. Replacing the shingles on the building in Kinsman Park. A civic centre sort of keyless entry for the building. Public works that will actually be a we looked at the CCTV replacement just the last couple of days. They also had a paging system on their list, which we had put off till next year, whether they wish to swap those over. The paging system was suggested through health and safety for their emergency response. So food bank, building roof replacement. And then I have the library renovations there, the $1 million that have been discussed earlier. I believe that may be different now. I had it as coming through operations as a grant to the library, but there may be some changes there into the future. So that's facilities.
There's her.
Yes, through to, I guess it would be Mr. Schramm. Food bank building roof replacement. Once again, the number seems a bit high to me, considering I think for public works, we budgeted 250,000 for a much sizable, larger building. So questioning why it would cost $234,000 on a small building like the food bank to replace the roof, unless there's some other structural things that need to be done.
We're all happy back on that.
Okay,
Good question.
Can you respond to that?
Yeah. Yeah, through the chair to Mayor Zahara. I know that Guy has been doing some research, and we did have Garland was the consultant, I believe, the company that was looking at it. And it's my understanding that they're looking at a complete like putting on a whole new roofing system, not just repairing what's there. But further to that, I think they are looking at getting a second opinion with another consultant. So, you know, if there is a possibility of doing it, you know, at a more reasonable price, maybe repairing what's there or just getting a second opinion. But that is why I'm going in as high as it.
okay. Thank you for that clarification, Tanya. It absolutely needs to be done. We've had some serious damage to some of the renovations in there with the roof leaking, but I'm glad that we're gonna get a second opinion on that.
Councilor Taylor.
To the chair, Ms. Bittner, the library renovations, $1 million, where are we drawing that from?
Through the chair to Councillor Taylor, that is being proposed to come from the future Civic Cultural Centre Reserve.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, follow up.
Yes.
Would that bring the amount in that line? Thank you. I think it was 3 million was in there, and then you bring it down to 2 million. Why?
On the paper that you have.
Oh, yeah,
It's, I will leave it at 3 million. I usually, transfer 1 million in, and so the million's coming out. So it will remain at 3 million at the end of 2023. It'll be, it's at the, quite near the top of the reserves.
yes.
Councilor Brennan.
Through the chair, just been taking on as the outdoor light in the Griffiths Park and that. I just done a whole bunch of change out to LEDs. On places here and that, and it didn't cost anywhere near that. And we were able to use the same electrical. Just had to change out, there was sodium bulbs in there before. We just had to change out a few parts in there, and it didn't come to anything like that. And we put the floodlights up. That would flood out there. And yeah, we use that at Griffiths Park on the rink. I mean, we've got.
Sorry, maybe you said it's out of the table. If I could respond to you, the chair, to Councilor Better. Sorry. So I know, again, Mr. Latour has done a lot of research, and I know he did look into LED lights. And just to clarify, the Griffiths rink actually does have LEDs at the rink. It's the dog park and the basketball courts that are the concern. With the additional work that's being done in Griffiths Park in the building itself. Basically the electrical that exists at the location itself. There's going to be a lot of extra power required with the new furnace system and air conditioning and whatnot. So the building itself, and I guess the capacity is going to be just at meeting what we have there without needing to increase. So it sounds like if we are adding these other lights, they don't exist. There's no wiring going to either of those spaces. So that's all going to have to be dug in, but also enhance the entire capacity, I guess, of the electricity load at the location. So I think that's where this money is coming from. I know when he looked at solar options, he also did a lot of research on like what is it required to actually illuminate a ball field, which is what the dog park is, and solar lights wouldn't come anywhere close to doing that apparently. So that's why solar didn't sound like a great option. So I guess the question is, do we want to just pop up solar lights and have a bit of lighting, or do we? I think this is doing it right, having it properly engineered. That's where that number is coming from.
To the chair. Question actually mirrors Eric, because you were the one that actually made the motion on this. Because I remember the discussion you said like a lot of kids played basketball there. Was your vision just the basketball area? Or that was my sort of vision when I thought of, and then I saw like, maybe that was confusion for sure your part, when you saw 180 grand for one light to illuminate a basketball court. And that's kind of where I thought, or were you thinking more like bigger scope?
Through to Councilor Taylor and to administration, I think absolutely the basketball courts are my number one concern. We have a lot of kids, especially from our Filipino community, that spend upwards of 2 a.m. playing basketball there. There's not residences. There's a mobile home park that's adjacent, but they're pretty quiet. My vision is just popping up, like you say, a couple solar lights. So they're not having to try to play basketball with their headlights and can't really see what's going on. You pop 2 or 3 of those in that location and 1 or 2 over the dog park. The entire dog park does not need to be illuminated, just a area if somebody wants to take their dog late at night. Just like at the old site. I don't think we need to overcomplicate unless there's a specific reason that we've seen why we want to upgrade for 180,000. I think the cheaper alternative here would be desirable because that would be an improvement. That's all I'm looking for. This is not a place where there's thousands of people. There's, a handful, and I think any type of enhancement would be positive.
to the point of making sure lights turn down. So, you know, the puck and the hockey thing, absolutely concern a lot of our rinks that are adjacent to residences, but I think in this general area, I don't think that's as a large of concern. And if we start getting a lot of complaints, then maybe we'll have to make a different decision at that point, but that's just my point of view.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
To the chair, to administration, pretty much what Mayor Harris just said. I think looking at more of a cost-effective look, and again, I haven't heard from anybody that says, man, we really need more lights down at the dog park, or that's something I certainly haven't heard. I don't know about anybody else. I do see lots of kids playing basketball. I understand that. That's great. I think 180 grand is just a little too steep at this time to look at that. So I'll go for more cost-effective lighting down.
Mayor position, or not mayor position.
Councillor.
Councillor position.
There, Ed.
And, yes,
Through the chair to maybe to council, but sometimes she did mention that they are upgrading the power for the building, which could be an entire rephasing. And that's all buried cable in that area, and that could include a transformer, and that'll eat up all your money in a heartbeat. So before we yank the budget away from them, we better find out what the difference is going into the building versus what's going into the dog park and the lot, because the dog park and lot could be the very smallest part of that budget. Because anytime you're adding different levels of power to a building, you're gonna have huge costs. And my memory serves me correctly, a ground transformer could start at $30,000 to $60,000. So depends on the size of ground transformer, and that is all buried cable in that area. So that adds to your costs. So before we yank the budget away from them, let's maybe get some feedback that, you know, maybe we don't need as an elaborate, we don't need to illuminate the dog park like a ballpark because nobody's playing ball in there. But there's probably a good portion of that budget's tied up in that building. So let's maybe before we yank that, then we should get some maybe more clear direction on what all those costs are, as opposed to because I did hear upgrading the power in the building for air conditioning and HVACs and all the other stuff. And I do know that comes at a huge cost because you're probably changing panels and you have piles of labor in there. So.
Through the chair to Mr. Positioning, we certainly, at this point, the engineers have indicated that what we are putting in, like with the current design at Griffiths, that what we have right now will handle the load, but just. And so that, and making sure, and that's if it's set just properly, that this doesn't fit in at the same time that cuts in. And so it sounds like the load that we have there right now is going to manage the building. But anything additional that we put in is probably going to put us in a situation where we need to do the upgrade. But I do appreciate the notion, because the way that some of these bills go, you never know what we come across. So I do appreciate that.
Through the chair to Councillor Positioning, this amount for the outdoor lighting, that doesn't include anything to do with the Griffiths Park building complex. It's not included in here at all.
Okay. Maybe.
Yes.
Maybe through administration, maybe in the future with some of these projects, we can have a bit better breakdown so that we're not getting told two different things. So I'm hearing upgrades to the building and upgrades to the park, and then no, it's not part of the building, but it is part of the building, so it's kind of confusing on our end. About that kind of a detail. And then again, maybe further to that, the building for the thing, are we putting the truss system on there? Is that why it's 230 grand? Or we replacing the flat roof? Like those kind of information helps us make a decision better to go, oh, that makes sense why it's $230,000 and not why it's, you know, a $30,000 or $40,000 retarring. It's a full-on new truss system, and that's a whole different story for us at this table to go, that makes sense. Okay, we can justify it, as opposed to bunch of what ifs. So.
Move on. Under recreation, there's a couple of items there for the leisure centre, for vacuum and the salt cell system. And of course, an amount there for the YCE centre for next year, in anticipation of groundbreaking. So not too much under recreation yet.
Feel like that kid in class. So through the chair, the two items in terms of the leisure center, those both are for the leisure center. Okay, are they things that carry through to the multiplex? Or are they to last us until then?
Second part.
Essentially, they're required.
They're all right, yeah, those are the.
Through to Councilor Taylor, excellent question. Everything that we look at for the existing facility is very carefully brought forward and contemplated whether or not it should be put in, just given the timing of what we're looking at, especially the next phase of the project. So this is something that these are the necessary pieces.
Thank you.
Right, so under public works, we have two pickups. It's actually V108. I'll have to update that as we move forward, and V131 replacements for two pickups. Our one-ton pickup is a Parks.
Chipper truck, the lease for tree chipping, and the half ton is the utility meter reach truck.
That's right. Any questions on fleet? So I'm now on to our roads and transportation. We have two sanitary sewer upgrade projects there, 10th Ave from 51 to 52nd and 54th Street from 1st to 6th. As you see, the funding for those are coming from grants. We've gone out to MSI and federal gas tax fund for those projects. Some general road repairs of 400,000 and the acquiring a crack sealing unit for 110. And then you'll see the blue projects there, carryover ones, and those two green ones are those deferred ones that were for the provincial project. So I'll pause now.
Councilor Bennett.
The chair to say whether that crack sealing unit, is that the new one replacing the old one we have, or the old one give out?
So, through Mr. Chair, so this is interesting. So I think it's part of the operating budget. If you recall, council asked us to also add some summer students to do the beef up our crack sealing program. I guess historically we had some typical patty tank in the back of a pickup truck and the pots and staff, the summer students would go around and do the crack sealing. At some point, my understanding is that there was we purchased a spray patch unit, and at the time the advice was that could do all of the crack sealing and the spray patching could all be done with this one unit. That's in fact not the case. There are two different levels of maintenance service that are required at two different times and different application standards. So at any rate, at the time we didn't have the summer students, so the fix is to get this crack sealing unit that would let us do that maintenance program as effectively as possible. At present, we've also added 2 summer students, and so now we've got potentially double up. So I think in the grand scheme of things, we could look at maybe when we put the crack sealing unit in the capital, we didn't have those 2 summer students. I guess what I'm trying to say. So we don't need both, I don't think. We could probably save some money on the operations side by just, I talked to my operations managers, and if they had to pick which one, they would take the crack sealing unit. So the little pots that we used to have in the patty tank tub really don't exist anymore. They were kind of pitched in the back for you when the crack sealing or the spray patch was supposed to be the end all be all solution. So we could probably get away with one or the other, but the crack sealing one would be our preference in the capital. We could probably defer the summer students till another time. That's something that we can certainly entertain if council wishes, or we can do both of them. We can certainly always use the extra help, but
to the chair, back to Mr. Kitlitz. So if you buy the crack seal, you don't have a few people to operate, I'm confused.
So, Mr. Chair, we do have 2 summer students. We do have them in our current operating budget, and so typically what it takes is 1 operator and 2 summer students could operate that unit. So if we didn't have that unit and we had For summer students, we go back to, we have to buy the melting pots and use a patty tank and go back to that system, which isn't the best one. It's not as nearly as effective or efficient, and it's harder to clean than that. So we do still have the capacity. This unit was put in the capital because it helps us do with less people. So.
Councillor Bear.
Thanks, through the chair to Mr. Kitless. So this is an operational question and I'm not a road repair person. So when we use terminology like tar filling and crack sealing, I'm trying to picture this in my head, which one that is. So the tar filling is the black goop that goes in the cracks. So I imagine that. And the crack sealing is that gravelly stuff that makes a bump, and seems, from my observation on my own street, seems to be holding up a lot longer than the tar goop. That's just evaporates. So which one is this now, this crack sealing?
Yeah, so through here, so this is the more common and quicker application we should do every year. So that's just the tar, the liquid tar that goes in the small cracks to keep them sealed. When they get too big, and if we don't do that tar sealing, that's when they get really big, and that's when you're using the spray patcher. It throws in the rock and the gravel and tar all together. So this one is the really early setting preventative one that is much needed to keep us from getting larger cracks.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Through the chair, Mr. Kitless, what's lifespan of a crack sealing unit?
Through Mr. Chair, that's a great question. I imagine we can get a good life, but I really don't know.
5 years.
No longer than that. A little longer than that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
essentially where I'm going with this is like, this is a more cost-effective solution if we get 2 summer students every year for the next lovely years. Yeah, we hit even one crack sealing unit, than to spend 2 summer students for the next. Every years.
I can't say for sure what it is, but I'm sure it's in excess of 10 years. I think we could probably get out of a unit like that. And it's just more of an efficient piece of equipment that we can get more done. Hopefully we can build a program and we can get it all done every year. So that's our
I think safety wise too,
Yeah.
using this unit compared with the plus.
Yeah.
Big thing.
I did come back to a picture of it, but I didn't really get it. So
Just a question to Mr. Kidlitz. When that gravel stuff is spread on the road there and then it comes winter, how much of that gets scraped away by plows, or does it really matter?
Mr. Chair, I don't know that I have the technical expertise in the operation to really answer that. I think you're always going to lose a little bit of stuff through your operations, but I think the crack sealing or the spray patching is done really often in the year. A lot of it gets worn off anyway, just through tire movements. But yeah.
Sure, thank you. Councillor Schneider.
Just to answer your question, the purpose of the gravel is so the tar doesn't get pulled out. So once the tar is settled, the gravel is unimportant. It can go away.
Okay, great. Mayor Zahara.
Yes, wants to talk about crack tonight. So many times to be anyway. Question regarding roads and transportation, the pedestrian crossing lights near the A&W, not completed this year. I believe it's going to be moved into next year, but I don't see it in the budget here. So I'm just wondering what's going on with that.
Through the chair to Ms. Power. I was notified of that just in the last couple of days. The service had already gone out. It was one of those ones at the end of the year. If it's not completed, it will you're going to see that come back to you in spring adjustments for the final go through. At the time when I was preparing this, I was under the impression that would be finished by the end of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. King.
So I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on the road repair stuff general. So this is just a little bit of money to do again for 2023 is just fix some of our problem areas. We're doing the analysis on our pavement management system now that did the analysis of all our roads to give us sort of the high flyers that we need to tackle. So we're just going to try to get as many of those done, sort of patched up this year as we can based on that data and any other inputs that we might have from our operators, or maybe council has some spots they think need attention, but that's the intention for that piece right there.
Thank you, Mr. Kidlitz. Would this include dealing with some of the heaves, particularly the bad one on 8th Avenue, until we do further underground infrastructure work?
So through Mr. Chair, so I guess we can look at that one. One of the things that, you know, like we did this year, we fixed some of the other heaves that were around town. That if we were able to see the 5-year draft plan we have up, we do have 8th Ave, 7th Ave, 1st Ave, all within the next 2 or 3 years to tackle the full reconstruction undergrounds and surface. Certainly we can look at that as maybe there is an option or a sort of a stopgap option to fix some of the drivability on that one. We'll look at it for sure. But we are planning on doing that project, maybe forwards on the list, I believe.
Okay. Thank you.
This time I just pause. I'd like to bring up the 5-year plan again while we're talking about the roads and transportation to see what's coming up. Just hope I picked the right one. Yes. So if we're looking at the sort of infrastructure, and this does include roads and the utilities that you'll see a little bit further down our list. So you can see the 2023 column is what you're seeing in your agenda. So going out, we have other projects going out to other years. There's sanitary sewer upgrade at Edson Drive, slated for 2024, and another one on 54th Street from 14th to 13th Ave for that one there. Griffiths Park storm drainage and the 8th Ave deep utilities, slated for 24 and 25. Anything you see on here at the moment that is blank, it doesn't have a colour on it. We haven't sourced the funding or decided how that's going to be funded as of yet, but we'll be working on that as we go forward with the 5-year plan. So you can see further out in 25, we have a 2nd Ave storm sewer and sidewalk item, continuing the 8th Ave, and then also bringing on, hopefully in 2025, the 7th Ave deep utility one as well, if we're able to fund those in that time. Also there, 1st Ave, starting in 2025 for the east side, and then east of 50th, and then west of 50th to start in 2026. Moving on, there are quite some high numbers there. So these may be revisited or having find funding sources for those. The 1st Ave waterline looping is out to 2027. That's at the moment slated at 5 million. We have the wastewater treatment plant upgrades that will be coming up as well, starting in 2024 with the design, and then moving on to the actual upgrades for the next 2 years from there. We do have a recycle water system at the spray coat. It is out at the edge at the moment. There'll be a lot more work to go into that before we decide where that would be able to be slated in. There's just a little design for the loading stations refit at the wastewater plant. Some valve replacement at Edson Drive for out to 2 years. The Tiffin booster station repairs, 43A Street for 2nd and 4th Ave. Repairs for that replacement, I'm assuming.
Those are water lines, replacements, upgrades, and then just surface. So
thank you.
Well, that's some of our older water infrastructure in there too that catch up.
And then 45th Street as well for the next, slated for that next year. More exploration for alternative source water coming in 2024. Degas is a regulatory item. I believe that's linked to the fluoride plan up here. So we have another regulatory thing from fluoride. You'll see $100,000 this year for a 2 years out to actually do that project. So the degas, we do actually have a grant secured for that from the Alberta Municipal Wastewater Program. Our water master plan, we've slotted into 2027, and next year looking at sort of feasibility design for highway beauty. We need to do a little bit more research into that too, as to what's actually be required for that. So I thought I'd just run through that 5-year plan. You'll see this come back in December for council review. We need to review it at least once a year. But this sort of gives you an idea of some of those larger projects that we have coming through the pipeline for our infrastructure. There are questions on the roads and transportation. We have an energy project this year would be slated for the burying the power lines at 46th Street around 9th Ave. This is close to the Mary Bergeron School. And that is slated to be funded from the energy reserve. Any questions on that project?
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the chair. I know we talked about this too. Budget meeting? It was budget meeting. I don't know if I was expecting 250,000. We need to do it, yes, because we have this beautiful, what we're developing is a beautiful new area. And the problem, my problem with it is that it's just an aesthetic. Right, that is all it is. I don't know, unless someone can, hugely consider it's a safety thing or whatever. I know I want to do it, but maybe I can be convinced. It was just, I was a little more of a shock when I saw $250,000 to bury how many blocks of lines?
3.5.
Yeah.
To Councillor Taylor, it's absolutely a safety concern. You have overhead lines near a school playground. In a high traffic area, actually, with the amount of seniors and people that are in that area with schools in that area. I was actually thought it would be a lot more than 200-some-thousand. Boring lines is very expensive, and as council positions pointed out on a couple of occasions. Transformers, boring those it's very expensive, and this is the one section that is incomplete in that area. There was a multi-year plan that looked after various areas. I have no concern supporting it. It's coming from our Fortis franchise fees, which was always the purpose of those fees to pay for things like this. And we have to tackle some other areas that have these areas. So I see it as a safety concern. I see it as an aesthetics issue as well.
Yep, through the chair of the mayor's area. Yep, okay, you convinced me. That's all. Don't gotta convince me. It is a shocker of a cost, but yeah.
I think the kicker, sorry to jump in, I think the kicker for me is this is not going to affect any reserves for other infrastructure or taxation. This is coming from the franchise fees. So that's why I don't really have a huge concern with spending that kind of money.
Councillor Byer.
Thanks, through the chair to administration. Just on the energy projects, I thank you, Councillor Taylor, for asking that question and sparking this discussion. So that is coming out of that energy reserve, which is just on this page here. So it shows it as an opening balance of $1 million. We're spending 400, and there's that plus more going in. So we're going to end up with 1.1 million. Do we have like a plan for that 1.1 million? I know Mr. Rion, when he did his last presentation, it wasn't him that actually did it. There was kind of alluded that there were other projects that we could do to continue on that where we started. Is there a plan for that? Yes, I'm then looking at the 5-year plan under the energy projects. We do have some of this coming up that came from Mr. Rion's plan. So next year, to put in LED lighting at the museum and the fire hall, water conservation retrofits, landfill lighting retrofit, and then some window replacements at the fire hall. So there's some projects that have come from the energy manager that we have. Thanks. Just to follow up to that. So we're just on the transfers in with that Fortis and Echo franchise fees. It looks like there's about $550,000 going in each year. But not $550,000 worth of projects, so. I'm just wondering if there's it just seems like then it will keep building, which is great if we're planning on something that requires a lot of funding. So I'm just wondering about that.
Seriously, so I don't know if I'm gonna ask this the way that you wanted, but I think one of the things is we don't have a resource to run our engineering program anymore. So what I did is I went through the work that Brendan did and I tried to find some projects that I think we could tackle over the next couple of years. As we spent around this 5-year plan, we're still building it. There's still lots of projects on the list without question. It just comes down to, again, our capacity to do all this stuff. I mean, there's a lot of work to do over the next handful of years. So we're trying to tackle some of them. Some of maybe the lower hanging fruit, I guess, is what I call it for now. Until at such point we can resource this a little heavier than we are now. So they're on the list still. They're still on a list. We haven't lost them. We'll continue to.
Thanks. So thank you, Mr. Gitlitz, for the church, Mr. Gitlitz. I appreciate that. I realize that we have some capacity issues. So I would just maybe throw it out there that if there is a project that we perhaps have the capacity for that's necessary, but we don't have the funding for it, that maybe that could be brought forward and maybe council could entertain transferring some of that money to another project if we have that. So certainly don't want to speak on behalf of council, but I would just be entertained to hear if there was something that we couldn't fund, but it's a necessary project and we do have capacity in another area. So thank you.
Yeah, through the chair to councillor By, just on that, it's council's discretion to use these reserves as they wish. We have done non-energy projects out of the energy reserve in the past, so that is definitely something that can be looked at.
Through the chair to councillor Bear. Historically, we've done a lot of aerial burial with it. So it's one of those things, even as a town councillor, drive around, if there's a neighborhood, you go, this looks terrible. And if we buried it, it would look 1,000 times better. Those are the projects to bring forward. It could even go further to the mayor's project of Griffiths Park. That's an energy thing. Maybe not a bad idea. We have that reserve there. The solar panels is a solution, but also if we have a reserve for energy, we collect from our residents to put into these projects, like it makes your town safer, and it definitely makes your town aesthetically more appealing for sure, because power lines and poles are not attractive.
Okay.
So next on the list we have a couple of projects at the airport where it's just replacing a loaded room, and then a carryover from 2022 for the terminal building repairs. Moving on from there, our last section we have to review is the utilities. We saw some of these as we went through the quick look at the 5-year working papers. So for this year, bringing on water well 25 to re-drill and commission a hydraulic water valve maintenance unit, starting that fluoride plan, the regulatory item, a purchase of a water leak detection and locating unit, start of the D-gas regulatory project as well, and to do some groundwater monitoring wells. There's 3 of those. They're also regulatory. That needs to be brought through on a regulatory basis. Again, the blue items are the projected carryovers from 22, and also to start the stormwater asset condition study. This is another one that may end up flowing through operations because it doesn't actually give us an asset at the end of it. It's just a study and information, but it's quite a significant amount, and we have to trying to get that funded through grants. Sometimes they fund them, sometimes they don't, being studies, but I will definitely give that a try. If not, we will come back and do some switching around of different projects. So that's utilities. Any questions?
Councillor Meyer.
Thanks. Through the chair to Ms. Bittner, on the fluoride plan, that regulatory, is that the one that has to be dealt with before 2023, which then would have to be replaced before 27? Yes. Yes. Okay. All right, I'll stop sharing with us now. So you do have that on your agenda for reference too. Right, so that's the presentation of the proposed capital budget. There's any other questions or comments on there?
Councillor Black.
Thanks. Through the chair to administration, just something that I forgot to ask earlier on the roads and transportation, the Waste Creek design and construction. So I know it's been on the books for a few years and there's some complications to that. So it's budgeted at 1.8 million. So, and I did see on the 5-year capital plan that there's several series of millions of dollars to do that. What part of that 1.8 consists of that construction, that title? Is it like mainly just design stuff, or is there something getting like built, I guess, or completed out of that 1.8?
So through your chair, so absolutely, it's for both design and construction. And unfortunately, because of some of the land issues we're having there, we can't get onto the land to finish the design. So the design isn't even really completed yet because we need to get survey data from elevations on those lands to the downstream end of our design. So really, we're in a bit of a pickle until we can get some of these land acquisition issues taken care of to move this project along. One thing I can share with council is we're getting some assistance from the province to get an extension of the grant that we have for that particular project, because we don't want to lose that money. So we're getting I've seen a draft of it, everyone's been saying it, but sort of to the grant authority to say, hey, there's some unforeseen circumstances here that are holding us up to these extents. So we're working on that to make sure that gets extended. But yeah, it's we don't have a date when that's gonna get back on track, but we're hopeful sooner than later. It's pretty integral. It's the bottom end of our storm sewer for that whole sort of, I think, the east side of town. So pretty critical.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, to the chair, I'm not sure about talking about this now, but in terms of obviously this is a capital project, and I people mention this. And I'm not interested in putting this forward in this capital project, but is this something that we would discuss at the 5-year plan when that comes up in December? Is like, because looking at the Trails Master Plan, and this was something that was created in 2017. And I've had residents say up about 63rd Street. And there's no sidewalk / trail, right? And this is not something I'm interested in sort of putting forward in terms of this capital project, but is it looking ahead to a few weeks' time when we look at, you say the 5-year plan you brought up for that time? Is that a time when we should be discussing it at that time? That's something looking for direction from council. Go for it. Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Taylor was just waiting for just understanding what your question was.
Yes, so in terms of looking at around 63rd Street, there's no sidewalk there, but according to the Trails Master Plan, it would be a trail that would have to go up. The trail that would double as a sidewalk, or a sidewalk that double as a trail, whichever. And many residents say like we'd like to see something expanded, right? You know, I've sort of indicated that may not be something we look at the 2023 budget, but it could be something down the ways. So in terms of bringing that forward, if that's something we could just think about in terms of the 5-year plan that we have in terms of capital projects.
Sorry. Mr. Taylor, are you talking north of 13?
Yes, sorry, and I guess I forgot that, it's north of 13, between about 13, 17, 17.
If I may, I'll share once again the working papers of our 5-year. Generally, every year, as you'll see here under parks and trails, we tend to have an amount set aside each year. We're not necessarily, it's not necessarily slated for anything in particular. It came, I think, from that Trails Master Plan to have sort of this amount of money set aside. So there is money in there for trails that sometimes is used for other items, like, for example, the bridge this year coming in for 2023. So there is an amount in there, but not necessarily slated for anything in particular, but that doesn't mean that can't happen into the future.
If I may, just to answer your question, just with regards to the what the planning exercise, when we bring forward the 3-year operating and the 5-year capital plan, the intention is to have a discussion on these projects that are slated for future years. Knowing that this plan it does change year over year, we do intend on having a more comprehensive plan for council to be able to they can help direct us from year over year. Essentially, you should be able to, from one year to the next, you could have your 3-year operating all at once. That's the ideal state where we'd like to get to. Same thing with the 5-year capital, and even further than that, I'd like to see us have a 10-year capital, 20-year. That's the direction we'd like to get to. At this point, when we bring this forward in a few weeks' time, it will be similar. Well, you see the draft essentially. When we're talking about the Trails Master Plan, I think there's an opportunity to bring that back to take a look at. It is something that, is understanding as far as the direction, if the direction has changed, and if it's something that we want to revisit. So that has been discussion that we've had, just to ensure that that we are budgeting in the way that is hitting the mark when it comes to these plans, and also sometimes we revisit to make sure it's the same thing. In a different sense, Vision Park, we had to revisit that based on a few different factors, but also the change is that the scope of the project changed because essentially we're building out a park that is more feasible and reasonable for us to be taken care of as well. Because one of the things that we're really looking at and we're trying hard to really address is that all of these capital projects have an operational component as well. So it's one of those things where we have all of these projects, and essentially, when it is complete, we have to be able to operate as well. So we want to tie those a little bit closer together for our future plans. So this plan isn't, is what you saw the draft, but in future, the comprehensive look at it is something that we will have. And as Councillor Position noted, having full details on these projects is the intended approach as well. So I welcome the questions and I appreciate the feedback.
And through the chair, my apologies for not making that clear, just kind of going off like one French fry right now today, so I may not make more sense. There you go, but thank you.
If time changes and the clock, and he's thinking about that.
I just want to thank administration for their work on this. I know really you with questions. Look forward to our future budget discussion next week and the week after. That.
Thank you, Ms. Bittner. Here.
Need a buzzer.
Thanks.
We need buzzers.
It's okay. Thanks. So to the chair, to administration, just to kind of further to Councillor Taylor kind of mentioned with the Parks and the Trails and bringing that up. Is there any reason why we have our trail, so that 200,000, I believe, has been used to just maintain the trails as well, right? If I'm not mistaken, on previous years. Is there any reason why we would continue to keep that in our capital budget when it's a regular maintenance, kind of part of our operating of those trails? Instead of, as we currently have it in our capital budget instead, is that just maybe that's how it was started, or I guess we would have to raise taxes to change that or something. I'm not really sure.
Through the chair to Councillor By, I'm not quite sure of your question, but the 200,000 has sometimes been used for maintenance and not creation of trails, just depending on what was needed at the time. But it's always been funded from, it used to be funded from MSI. I think that's being funded from, might even be, I have to double check, I'll close that down, sorry, the revenue sharing possibly, I'll have to go back and look at it for you. Are you asking if that could be used for operations in the future, or? I'm just not quite, just trying to clarify the question.
I guess the question is the current maintenance of the trails, the regular sealing the cracks, I'll call that as the regular maintenance. I know there's other things that happen as well. Is that already existing in our operating budget? Or is that always funded through the capital?
Through the chair to Councillor By, my understanding was a general maintenance of that would be covered under operations.
Okay.
It's just if they're more robust, you know, we're gonna have to take some of that top off and put more down. And depending on the cost of that, it's either classed as operational or.
Okay.
But in general maintenance would be included in the operation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So now we, no community and protected services, no information items, no sundry. Questions from media and the public regarding items from this committee of the whole meeting.
We have nobody on.
No one online.
You probably.
I did. Okay. So no closed meeting tonight. I take
Motion for adjournment.
motion for adjournment. All in favor?
I was just
Thank you.
voting.